Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So, hello and welcome to our very special episode we are recording today. I'm delighted to be joined by Aviad, who is a Hamas expert and studies a fundamentalist Islamic movement. He is the author of the book Politics of Terror. So, thank you so much, sir, for taking your time and speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I want to start the conversation a little bit with what's going on in America, and then I will come back to Hamas. So, while the war with Hamas is going on and Israel is fighting the war against Islamic extremism, we see certain Gen Z on TikTok finding of Osama bin Laden's letter, which was not even written by bin Laden but al-Zawahiri. That letter finding as their voice of resistance because that symbolizes what he stood for. And if you've seen those videos of people coming out, they say it's a life-changing moment for them. Now, someone who has studied Islamic extremism for so long, your first reaction on that, and tell us about whether bin Laden ever stood for resistance and he became a poster boy right now for the Gen Z on TikTok.
Look, the letter of bin Laden was wrote and published about 20 years ago after the attack in 9/11 of the World Trade Center in New York. But it's out of context. Maybe the letter is real, but it's out of context. It deals with the attack in Europe and on the Pentagon, okay, but there is no connection to the massacre that Hamas did in the 7th of October this year. The main thing is that, or the main things that equal is that bin Laden, Al-Qaeda organization, and also Hamas movement are fundamentalist Islamic movements. That's the main equal. But the letter itself is out of context for us. It's a lousy propaganda in the social media.
And when we talk about how this letter has been so widely circulated, it's kind of interesting how young people are getting access to it and is finding it as a life-changing moment for them. How is that even possible that the entire war on terror, which started with the 9/11, and one of America's greatest villain turned as an poster boy or hero overnight just because of one letter that people are relating it to?
Look, that is the power of the social network that wasn't been in 20 years ago. Okay, another thing, those kids or adults didn't live about 20 years ago or something like that. Maybe they were just the kids, so they don't know the context of the letter. I don't think that they really know the Islamic history and the history of Islamic terrorism good enough. So when they see a kind of that letter in the social media, it's turned them. Okay, but that's not the issue. The issue is the use with the thing like that, with that kind of a letter out of a context. There is no connection between Al-Qaeda in 9/11 to the massacre that Hamas movement did about a month and a half ago, but someone used that to lousy propaganda against the Israelis, against the Americans, and it's out of context.
And now to come to what's happening in Israel, I want to understand a little bit for our audience about Hamas as an organization, especially how they operate military, or a little bit about the ideology as well. While there might not be direct connections, but we all knew that Hamas did have cooperation with Al-Qaeda, for example, till 2005, actually. And even though it might not have direct links with ISIS, but we see the brutality, what it has carried on October 7 does symbolizes that they aren't any less than what ISIS did. Could you just tell a little bit about probably the ideology and how, as an organization, they are situated?
Of course. Hamas organization was established in 1987 at the beginning of the first Intifada, but his roots are deeper than that. Hamas is the Palestinian extension of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which established in 1928, okay, by Hassan el-Banna. Hamas was established in the beginning of the Intifada by Sheikh Yassin, the spiritual leader of the Islamic Brotherhood in the Gaza Strip. When the Intifada broke up, he realized that if he will not took and will use violence against the Israelis, he will lose the street to the Islamic Jihad, which established about in 1981 in the Gaza Strip also. Okay, so when Yassin established the Hamas movement, about a year after that, he writes and published a convention that is the main ideological paper of Hamas movement. That papers put the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, in a context, tell us about the relation between the Hamas movement and other organizations, tell us his own ideology against the Jews based on the Quran, for example. And also he say one thing, the Quran is our constitution, our intention, our goal is to die as martyrs against Israel in the cause to liberate the land of Palestine from the Mediterranean Sea to the river. That is the main goal, to exterminate Israel as a liberated and free state, and to establish an Islamic Palestinian state in the region between the sea and the river, as part of Al-Ummah al-Islamiyah, general Islamic states in the whole Middle East. The Hamas also have established during the first Intifada a military wing that calls the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigade. First, that wing started to operate in Gaza Strip, and after that, it spread into the West Bank also, first to Hebron district, and after that to the north of Samaria. And in the first year, the military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigade, operated against Palestinians who collaborated or suspiciously cooperated with the Israeli government in the territories. After that, they began in military or terror attacks against Israeli goals, like buses, like restaurants, with the suicide bombers, who blow themselves in buses and cause a lot of damage and casualties in Israeli side. After the second Intifada broke up in year of 2000, in September 2000, Hamas made a few things, especially in the Gaza Strip. He built up a real military power with 5 brigades geographically in the north of Gaza, in the city of Gaza, in the central part of the Gaza Strip, mainly the four refugee camps in the middle of the Gaza Strip, also in the Khan Yunis area and in Rafah area. Another thing, he began to do a rocket infrastructure and enlarge all the time the range of the rockets. It starts with 1 kilometer, and now you have also rockets that launch till 250 kilometers. That is a main achievement in that kind of area. Another thing, after Hamas won the election in 2006, and after he did a coup d'état in Gaza Strip in June 2007, Hamas began to dig a lot of tunnels in along the border with Israel, the border which been between the Israeli area and the Gaza Strip, and also began to dig a lot of tunnels inside Gaza Strip itself, and now we see the results of that.
So one of the questions that will come to our mind is about how it's funded. Hamas, we obviously know that it gets a fair share of money from Qatar, and Iran does supply with weapons. But if you could break it down a little bit for us, like how it managed to actually mobilize, for example, its weaponry, as you were mentioning, the rockets from
Of course.
upgraded.
Of course. Okay. Hamas got a lot of weaponry from Egypt through tunnels that he dug under the Israeli border with Egypt, and after the disengagement from the Gaza Strip, he dug a lot of tunnels under the border without an interruption, and a lot of weapons penetrated from Egypt through the Sinai Peninsula to the Gaza Strip. And the source of those weapons actually comes from a lot of sources. Iran gives Hamas a lot of financial assistance to buy weapons and to bring them into a Gaza Strip through the border, under the border, through Sudan, through Sinai, through Egypt, into Gaza Strips. And Hamas, besides that, also developed a real infrastructure and manufacture by himself some of the weapons, like the anti-tank Yassin rocket or the Qassam rocket. It manufactured them in the Gaza Strip itself by his own, by a lot of materials with dual use, for example. Okay, that's the main thing that by that he made his infrastructure.
And I wanted to understand about this distinction that Hamas has been able to differentiate between its political and its military wing, that a lot of people around the world, for example, do have certain sort of legitimacy because they believe that Hamas was elected, it has won election, that's why it is a legitimate form of government, and it has its political wing as well. And we have seen some of the leaders even based out of Qatar as well. So how does that operate?
Okay. Hamas movement have a few power centers, okay? The first one, the main political headquarters now is located in Doha, the capital of Qatar. The old Politburo of the Hamas movement, most of it is located in Doha. We talk about persons like Ismail Haniyeh, the chief of the Hamas Politburo, Khalid Mashal, the former one, and also Musa Abu Marzouk, and a lot of prisoners that was liberated in the Shalit deal in 2011. There is also Hamas also have a few offices in some of the capitals in the Middle East. There is an office from 1992 in Tehran, the capital of Iran. There is an office in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, in Sudan, in Lebanon, of course. Until 2012, there was the main headquarters of Hamas was in the Yarmouk refugee camp at the suburbs of Damascus. Some of the military or the chief of the political headquarters of Hamas are located in Beirut at the Dahia, the main neighborhood that also the headquarters of Hezbollah located there. The most prominent person in this location is of course Salah el-Aruri. He was born in a village near Ramallah, which called Arura. He operated the first military infrastructure of Izzedin al-Qassam Brigade at the West Bank at the Hebron district. And after he sat in Israeli prison for almost 18 years and liberated and deported from Israel, he began to build a new infrastructure in the West Bank and operated it from outside. Another power center of Hamas is, of course, in the Gaza Strip. Hamas, as I told before, born in the Gaza Strip. Yahya Sinwar is the head of Hamas government in the Gaza Strip, and most of his military commanders are also in Gaza. As I told before, Hamas has five brigades geographically in the Gaza Strip, and there is also center power in the West Bank, of course. Israel now, during the operation, took a lot of them and put them on jail to prevent a lot of terrorist attacks from the West Bank. Those are the main center power of Hamas. Okay, there is no much of a contact between the military wing right now and the political center in Doha. There's a problem of connection, I presume. The political leadership in Doha take the strategic decisions, but the translation into the field is by the military commanders in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank, of course.
And a couple of things I wanted to understand from this, because we have seen someone like Hamas is not very well seen even by the Islamic State, because they believe of their alleged connections with Iran, and they do not want us Shia militia to actually the Shia country to actually find the Islamic movement like Hamas. So how, I mean, at this point of time when we are comparing Hamas to ISIS, is there any sort of difference between Hamas and other Sunni militant organization in Gaza that operate, or between Hamas and ISIS?
Okay, look, Hamas, of course, is in the Sunni section of Islam, when Iran is in the Shiite section of Islam. But there is a very good connection between the state of Iran and the Hamas movement. Although there is a difference between those sections in Islam, there is a realpolitik between the two. Okay, Hamas and of course the Islamic Jihad, which is painted by Iranian, is almost Iranian proxy by far, are eating from the ends of Iran. Without the assistance, without the financial assistance from Iran, there is no raison d'etre for especially the Islamic Jihad, but also to Hamas movement. There are now proxies of Iran. They are part of the resistant axis in the region itself, part of it. Okay, Iran, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad are in the backyard of Israel, are proxies of Iran, and by them, Iran fighting with Israel indirectly. That's the main thing. And as far for the connection between Hamas and ISIS, look, all those fundamentalistic movements want the same ideal thing. They want to create a big Muslim nation in the whole world. they there is a what calls a Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, the House of War. If you are a kufr, so an infidel that don't believe in Islam, we have to fight against you, and we have to conquer your land, and to establish an Ummah Islamiyah, a large Islamic state across the whole world. That's the main thing that characterize the all Islamic fundamentalistic. Okay, Hamas also in the 7th of October. Um, we saw is the murderous character which characterized also ISIS. He beheaded the childs, raped women, burned alive people like ISIS did in Iraq and Syria especially. So right now, after the 7th of October, we saw that the murderous character of Hamas is like ISIS. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there is also, of course, as you told, another organizations in the Gaza Strip. For example, the Islamic Jihad. The Islamic Jihad is the second organization after Hamas in the Gaza Strip. He has also a very large military wing, which called the Jerusalem Brigades. Okay, the Islamic Jihad is absolutely Iranian proxy from the start. His founder, Fathi Shkaki, was assassinated in 1995 in Malta by Israeli Mossad agents. Was the first Palestinian fan of Khomeini revolution in 1979 in Iran, and after he was deported from Israel in 1988, in the first start that he have been in Lebanon soil, he get into the Iranian embassy to Hezbollah counterparts, and made with them direct connection, got from them a lot of finance, operates trained in the Hezbollah centers in Lebanon Valley, and there is a very, very good connection between Iran and the Islamic Jihad. For example, Islamic Jihad also have an office in Tehran, in the capital of Iran, for almost for more than 30 years.
And this is where I wanted to ask you about Iran actually a little bit. That Iran, for example, have had a good relationship with Hamas over the years, except that one part during the Syrian civil war, where Hamas was a little more aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood and it didn't have much connections with Iran. But again, after the change of the political leadership, we have seen again Hamas has developed again good relation with Iran. Could you just explain a little bit about the relation with Iran of Hamas in the terms of how it has over the years expanded, and where did it all begin actually with this cooperation?
Okay, look, till 1992 or something like that, there was there is no connection between the two, because Iran, because Hamas is part of the Islam, is part of the Muslim Brotherhood, as I said before, and Iran was and the Hamas was not part of the Shiite circle. Okay, after the Madrid Convention, after the Madrid process in 1991. Hamas movement made a real contact, a direct contact with Iranians, established an office in Tehran. Is the first representative in Iran was a man that called Imad El Alami. who deported from Israel in 1991. And after the Madrid process began, we see a lot of direct connection between Hamas and Iran. Iran assisted the Hamas movement with a lot of money, millions of dollars per year. Some of his operative are trained in Iran and in Lebanon. But after, and also there was there is created an axis between Iran, Hamas, and Syria, the ally of Iran in the Middle East. Till 2012, the main headquarters of Hamas was in Damascus. But when the civil war in Syria broke up at March 2011, and Hamas giving support to the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria against Assad regime, the Iranian look at this kind of step as a betray in Syria and in Iran. So Hamas leadership decided to leave Syria and to deliver its main headquarters from Damascus to Doha, to Qatar. Okay, and there was also there is a cut between Iran and Hamas, especially in the political level, but in the military level, I think that Iran continue to assist to the military wing of Hamas, and we see that kinds of results in the underground infrastructure, in the a lot of weapons that come and enter into a Gaza Strip with the assistance and with the financial assistance from Iran. So, although there was crisis between the two, in the operational level, there is a lot of connections and cooperation between Hamas movement, especially in the military level, and Iran.
And when you compare it to something like a Muslim Brotherhood, which has been like a parent wing for Hamas, for some of our viewers, it's kind of confusing, and probably I would want you to explain a little bit about how Muslim Brotherhood would want to create Hamas in the first place. It could have what, because it's Muslim Brotherhood in its general faction is very politically active, but not military active as such. So why would need Hamas as something like a resistance force in Gaza? That's one thing I wanted to ask. And the poster child of modern jihad, which we see, for example, Abdul Azam, who was actually a person who was born in the Palestine, and we have seen a lot of what the current Hamas charter has been attributed to what his ideology was. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay, look, the Muslim Brotherhood, as I said, established in Egypt in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna. That movement deal with the British mandate in Egypt and fought against them. So at the start, the Muslim Brotherhood had also a military wing that fought against the British in Egypt. Okay, and through the years, there were a lot of branches of the Muslim Brotherhoods across all over the Middle East, and in Palestine, they also created an extension, especially in the Gaza Strip. I want to remind you that till 1967, the Gaza Strip was part of Egypt under Egypt occupation after the war of 1948. So between 1948 till 1967, under the Egyptian regime, there is also a lot of influence of the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza Strip. Ahmed Yassin, for example, joined to the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza Strip at year 1955, something like that. Okay, so there is a presence of the Muslim Brotherhood in the Gaza Strip for many years ago, before Hamas was established. But the roots of Hamas are from the Muslim Brotherhoods. As for Abdallah Azam, he is a religious and a lecturer and doctor, of course, for Islam. He comes from the village of Silat al Khartiya at Jenin district. But at the 60s, last century, he lived the territories, the West Bank. For a while, he lectured in Saudi Arabia. But after the Soviets invaded to Afghanistan, he transferred himself to Pakistan, especially to Peshawar. And there he established a guest houses that in there he trained a lot of Arab Muslims to fight against the invaders from the USSR. Okay, in Afghanistan or in Peshawar, he contacted with Osama bin Laden, which come from Saudi Arabia, and there established a lot of training camps for a lot of Muslims from all across the world, and trained them and give them a military experience against the Soviets. Abdallah Azam assassinated in 1989, 1989, and he was the spiritual leader of Al Qaeda. Okay, but there wasn't a real connection between Hamas and Abdallah Azam. But Abdallah Azam have been in a few conventions, especially in the United States, when the political wing of Hamas in there, especially when Musa Abu Marzouk established the extension of Hamas in the United States during the 80s, he organized a few conventions with Islamic researchers or ideologists like Abdallah Azam, like Rashid Ranouchi from Tunisia, like, for example, Abdelaziz Oda, the spiritual leader of Islamic Jihad. Those persons come and entered to the US directly with no problem, and they lectured in the US in the 80s and convent together. And that's the main connection that Abdallah Azam had with movements like Islamic Jihad or Hamas. But because Abdallah Azam, fortunately, was assassinated in 1989, we cannot tell a lot about a connection after that, of course.
So I have a couple of last questions, and one of the things I wanted to understand is the initial years actually where we've seen the Oslo Accord, while it was being negotiated, we've seen a lot of attacks, and you were mentioning as well. And for a lot of our audience, and especially for a lot of conversation that has happened over the years, that Gaza is an open-air prison and it's been completely barricaded. We have seen, for example, after the de-escalation, for example, there was infighting in Gaza between Fatah and Hamas, actually, and how we've seen Hamas decimated and didn't allow any opposition in Gaza, and how that led to a barricade by both Egypt and Israel. The one by Egypt is not spoken much, that the one in Israel is spoken about. Tell us the initial years between how Israel had to operate while Hamas took over in Gaza, and over the years, if you could expand on that part of an open-air prison and the humanitarian crisis that's going on.
Look, after Hamas movement won the election in January 2006, the Israeli government didn't recognize the new Palestinian government headed by Hamas and Ismail Haniyeh. And also, they put a siege on the Gaza Strip. But I have to say a very, very important thing. The Gaza Strip um, has also another entrance from Egypt. So there is no a really siege on Gaza Strip, because after Israel disengaged from Gaza Strip, the Rafah crossing most of the time was open uh, for um, for traveling for Palestinians through Egypt to the entire world, and a lot of accommodations and supply get from Rafah crossing into the Gaza. So we cannot talk really about an Israeli siege on Gaza Strip. That's a very, very important point. Uh, After Hamas did a coup d'etat in June 2007, of course, the whole picture is changed. Uh, because after 2007, there is a border between the Hamas Emirate, Hamastan in Gaza Strip, and the State of Israel. And because Hamas did not recognize the State of Israel and looks as an enemy that he has to exterminate, we are in a state of war between Gaza Strip and Israel. So every 2 or 3 years, there is a round of or escalation and fighting between us and the Hamas movement or Islamic Jihad movement, or both of them, between Israel and the Gaza Strip. The first round of violence was after the kidnap of the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in June 2006, and from that level till now, every 1 or 2 years, there is a war or a military operation between Israel and Hamas. For example, in December 2008, there was an operation against Hamas, Operation Khalid, which lasted for almost 23 days between Hamas and Israel. During that operation, Israel invaded to the Gaza Strip and put a siege on Gaza City. Okay, after about 4 years from there, again another large operation, Operation Pillar of Defense against Hamas. Israel assassinated the head of military wing of Hamas, Ahmed Jabari, and for about a week, Israel and the Hamas movement fight each other. The other level, or the other level in the dynamic of escalation between the two, is of course in 2014 in the summer, Operation Protective Edge. Before that Operation Protective Edge, Hamas also tried to launch a large attack to the Israeli settlement across the border with Gaza Strip. But the security or the intelligence services of Israel knew about that intention, and to prevent that penetration into the territory of Israel, Israel attacked a tunnel near Rafah, and after that, the protective edge operation broke up for almost 50 days. In those 50 days, Israel destroyed almost 32 tunnels near the Israeli border with Gaza Strip. But after the military operation ended, there was almost a silence of 3-4 years between Israel and Hamas. But Hamas use that silence in the border to a very large buildup that we see is consequences, and right now with the underground city under the Gaza Strip. And then when we are getting on with the timeline to 2018, there is a lot of military operation between Hamas and Israel, because a lot of demonstration that Hamas had organized all across the border near the fence, okay, through 2008 to 2019. There is almost 300 Palestinians were shot by the Israelis because they tried to cross over the fence between Israel and the Gaza Strip. And we have come to 2021, to the operation of Guardian of the Walls, which started with the initiation of Hamas. Hamas had launched a few rockets to the capital of Israel, to Jerusalem. And after that, for almost 11 days, Israel and Hamas fought in May 2021. And there Israel attacked the metro, the underground city of Hamas, but couldn't destroy it. But now, 2 years after that, after the murderous attack of Hamas, Israel had no choice but to get into a direct war with Hamas and the Gaza Strip, and put an end to the Hamas government in the Gaza Strip, and put an end to the military infrastructure and the underground city of Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
And before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one last question, is about what's happening with the retaliation from Israel after the October 7 attacks. We see aerial bombardments now. The attacks have escalated more, where we see ground offensives begin in the northern Gaza, and probably it will lead to the southern Gaza very soon. I wanted to understand, if you could explain a little bit about what's going on with, let's say, the military part of Hamas. Is it decimated, or is it planning to be completely destroyed with these attacks? And is it possible? And two, the ideology of Hamas, as we mentioned earlier in this interview, is also based outside Gaza, parts of it in Qatar. So can Hamas be completely defeated, even with what we're seeing right now with the attacks?
Okay, I think that Hamas cannot be completely defeated, because the main thing is Hamas is an idea, an ideology. I have to say that in the population of the Gaza Strip is more than 2 million people. Okay, about half of them born after the Hamas coup d'etat in 2007. Okay, so most of the childs in Gaza Strip know only Hamas, only the Hamas ideology. So many of them are supporting Hamas. But you cannot kill the all Palestinian people in Gaza Strip, of course. So the ideology of Hamas will be on and on in the heads of those Palestinians. Another thing, as I told you before, Hamas has a few power centers, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also outside. Do Israel going to assassinate Hamas leaders in Doha, for example, or in Lebanon? I don't know, but there is a lot of risk by that. I want to remind you, for example, when Israel tried to assassinate Khalid Mashal, the head of Politburo of Hamas in Amman in 1997, for example, and failed. After that, the King of Jordan, Hussein, almost cut off the connection with Israel, almost abolished the peace agreement with Israel. But after Prime Minister Netanyahu then in 1997 promised him that Israel will not assassinate it again any person on Jordanian soil, the king of Hussein didn't do a thing between the two states. Okay, but there is a risk that if, for example, Israel will assassinate a person like Salah al-Aruri at the middle of Beirut, I tell you that there is almost probably there will be a war between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon. For example, do Israel will try, for example, to eliminate Hamas leaders in Turkey, in Ankara or in Istanbul? Probably not. Israel will not complicated its relations with Turkey, with Erdogan, because if Erdogan will declare a war against Israel, there will be a great problem for us, because I want to remind you that Turkey is part from NATO. And what about that? For example, another thing, a lot of delegation from Hamas leaders come from Doha, for example, to Egypt. About a few weeks ago, Khalid Mashal and Ismail Haniyeh come to Cairo to in a delegation of Hamas to Egypt, and met with the head of the military services or military and intelligence organization of Egypt on Egypt soil. Do Israel will take the risk and eliminate Hamas political leaders on Egyptian soil? I don't think so, because if you do that, you take a big risk, and you risk the relationship and the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. So there is a real problem to eliminate the political wing of Hamas organization outside the Gaza Strip. As for your question about the military ring in Gaza Strip, so it's a real big challenge. I don't know what Israel is going to do in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, because right now almost the whole population of Gaza are concentrated in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. But in the Gaza Strip, about 3 brigades of the Izzedin al-Qassam brigades are in the southern part, in the central part, in Khan Yunis, and then Rafah district. I don't know how Israel going to deal with those brigades when about 2 million Palestinians are concentrated at the same part of the strip. This is a really big challenge.
Well, I think that's all the question that I have. So thank you so much, sir, for taking your time and speaking to us. It was an honor
Thank you
hosting
very
you.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.